On a quiet evening, in the small room at the end of the hospital corridor, Mr. Robert lay on the bed, his tired eyes still shining with warmth as he looked at his son, David, who was sitting beside him. The heart monitor emitted small, regular beeps, blending with his weak breaths. David tightly held his father's thin hand, his heart filled with pain but still trying to smile. "Dad, I'm here now. You just rest, don't worry about anything." Mr. Robert smiled weakly, his trembling hand gently squeezing his son's hand. "David, do you remember? When you were little, you always climbed onto my back, making me be your horse to ride around the yard." David smiled softly, but tears fell silently. "I remember Dad was always strong, always protecting me." Mr. Robert's gaze became distant. "Dad has lived his whole life to protect the family, but now I think it's time for me to rest." David tightened his grip on his father's hand, his voice choked. "Dad, I'm not ready. I don't know what to do without you." Mr. Robert looked at his son for a long time, then gently said, "David, none of us truly leave. As long as you remember me, as long as you keep me in your heart, I will always be with you." The space was silent, only the sound of the gentle wind blowing through the window, stirring the white curtain. Memories suddenly flooded David's mind. The days his father taught him to ride a bike. The evenings they sat on the porch, talking late into the night. The times his father gently patted his shoulder whenever he fell. Mr. Robert's voice gradually softened, but still full of love. "Son, live happily. Love and protect your family, just like your father did. Don't be afraid, because you are strong enough to overcome everything." David nodded, but the tears kept flowing. He held his father's hand tightly, feeling the warmth gradually fading. A minute later, the heart rate monitor emitted a long beep. Mr. Robert slept peacefully. David was still there, his hand still holding his father's hand. Pain filled his heart, but deep down, he knew that his father had never really left. He is still here, in every teaching, in every memory, and in every beat of his heart. David sat quietly beside his father, his eyes fixed on the thin hand he had held many times as a child. Now it's getting colder, but it seems that the warmth from the memories is still lingering. The hospital room became unusually empty, though the surroundings were still familiar sounds, footsteps in the corridor, the sound of a gentle breeze gently brushing through the window. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself, but the tears could not stop falling. A nurse entered, looking at him with a sympathetic gaze. "We are very sorry, Mr. David," she said gently, placing her hand on his shoulder, but David just nodded slightly. No words could express this loss. After a while, he stood up, pulled the blanket up, and carefully adjusted his father's gray hair as if he were just sleeping. He took a deep breath, trying to suppress the pain, then leaned down and placed a kiss on his forehead. "I love you, Dad," he whispered. As he stepped out of the room, a bitter cold breeze passed, but it didn't make David tremble. He looked up at the night sky through the glass window, the stars twinkling above, and he remembered the evenings when his father and son sat on the porch, watching the night sky together, talking about the big and small things of life together. Unconsciously, he smiled. He was gone, but he was not gone. He is still here in every memory, in every instruction, in the way he will continue to live. And now, David knows that despite the pain, he has to keep going because that's the way to keep his father with him forever.